I bought a Gibson Les Paul from Germany. It's certainly not the highest end one that we've ever seen, but Les Paul Studios from the 90s are some of my favorites. It's the golden era. So let's see what we're working with here. It's a beautiful ebony one. Now it looks like we had like a bridge modification, but let's just make sure it survived the trip okay. Well, that's not a good thing. Wait, it's a headless conversion? I couldn't pass up the opportunity to document a headless Les Paul. This feels so strange. There's like no weight on the headstock. It is all within the body. And this feels so much shorter now, like some sort of a baby instrument. That is freaky. I'm sure you're wondering, what is the story on this? Well, there's actually a YouTube video about this. Over on Kaylen's channel, 6-String TV. He named the episode How I Made This Gibson Better. And essentially the story goes is he had some sponsorship money, so he purchased a 1995 Gibson Les Paul Studio in order to do this headless conversion. Now don't get too upset with him. This was actually a previously repaired guitar, and honestly, that repair didn't look the best. So it wasn't completely sacrilegious to do this. And now that I actually have the headstock, because I asked him if he had it, that's not even the original serial number here. Somebody had re-stamped that on there. So yeah, if there was a guitar to make a headless, it was this one. But you can check out his episode for the full process of slicing off the headstock, among other things. There will be a link in the description. But Kaylen had put this up on Reverb, and that's the first time I saw it. And I was like, yeah, let's document it. Because I do have a popular episode on my show when I documented the Headless SG. Now that one, in my opinion, was a little bit cooler because he like inlaid the headstock into it and it became an internet meme, and it was so glorious when it finally surfaced and I could document it for everyone. But off the top of my head, I believe that was a mid-90s Gibson SG, and that's a really good era for those. So the fact that he did this on a 1995, which is a really good era for a Les Paul Studio, just made it even more fun to document. Because if you're not familiar with the history of the Les Paul Studio, it was first introduced in 1983. The first 2 years actually incorporate an alder body with a maple neck and dot inlays. There was the baseline Studio as well as the Studio Standard and Studio Custom, which got additional binding. But it was Gibson's way to introduce a slightly thinner body Les Paul to cut down on some of the weight, and they've been in production ever since. However, around 85, that's when they switch into the mahogany bodies. In the later 80s, they get the ebony fretboards, but that golden era is the early 90s period, circa, 1990 through early 94-ish, when they introduced the trapezoid inlays. But starting in the mid-90s, that's when they switch back into rosewood. So this one's right outside of the peak golden era specs, in my opinion, but they're still really good, solid guitars. You're in that whole good wood era, as some people like to call it. It's just a return to form for Gibson, basically, when the Henry J era figured out what they wanted to do with the brand, and it was returning to tradition. But outside of the initial shock of not having a headstock, it actually is pretty fun to play, because I always find myself gravitating higher up the neck than I usually do, just to compensate for the fact that there is no headstock. So, I mean, at this point, we might as well just take it and sand away the heel to make it like an Access custom, because that would be a lot of fun. And maybe I will in the future, but right now, let's just document it as it was when it left Kaylen's house. Who says you can't polish a turd? This thing actually cleaned up pretty nicely. Now, unfortunately, it is pretty heavily scratched and dented and dinged. You got finish checking going on, as well as discoloration areas from who knows what. But I can at least restore its lustrous shine over top of all that. Let's go ahead and see what we're rocking here. A neck pickup, it's got a nice little dent right there. But it is still a Gibson USA base plate, which lines up with a 1995. So my bet is that's still a 490R. Whereas our bridge pickup, I could instantly tell something was amiss right here. Look at this. Now look at this. This is chrome. Coming down here, this is nickel. Sometimes it can be hard to tell if you don't see them side by side, but here's a very good comparison. So I knew this was not original. And on the back, unfortunately, we do not have any markings. Well, outside of something else that somebody put on there, it looks like it says 9.22, likely referring to the ohms, and then it says plus. However, if you look right here, you can see the outline of where a PAF decal initially was. So it's possible this might be a burst bucker of some sort. You can actually see just a little bit of that left right there. It's also possible this is some boutique thing. I really don't know. But within the circuit, it's reading 9K ohms in the bridge, our neck position 7.79, and the middle, just for fun, 4.18. Now, if the whole fact that this doesn't have a legit serial number on the back scares you off and makes you think, that's just a Gibson, that looks like an Epiphone serial number, I totally agree with you on that, but I can definitely tell you this is through and through 90s Gibson. You can tell by the woods that they were using, especially the rosewood boards. I know I talk all the time about the nice ebony ones, but even the rosewoods were particularly nice, and the bodies have a certain feel and heft to them. And of course our pickup routes and cavities are looking good too. You can see it's constructed with a maple top and a short neck tenon. I didn't see any other markings in here in either of the locations. And only some mild funny business in our bridge pickup. You can see as they were messing around with different pickups in here, they accidentally had to screw different screw holes. So that likely means it had like an Epiphone ring at one point in time, because those need a different location. So this definitely belonged to a player who liked to modify things. But no additional markings in our bridge cavity. But now our bridge tailpiece / tuner system. It's a licensed by KD patent. Kaylen said he got this off of AliExpress for like $50. I don't know anything about it, but it looks like he secured it to the body utilizing these 4 screws. So it's not like a system you can just lift up. It was directly mounted to the guitar. But like a regular bridge system, you've got your individual saddles here, but you'll notice that they're on roller bars, so that should help it stay in tune a bit better. You've got hex keys down here to adjust your intonation. And then the tailpiece thing is kind of interesting, the way that you string it on here. But what it looks like is this is a regular tuner. So for example, what you're seeing right here is like the headstock here. You put the string in like you normally do, and then you wind it up. You can see the hole right there where the string goes through. So it's not actually a locking system, I don't believe. But then to tune the guitar, you're utilizing these fine tuners. That's kind of what they are, kind of not. It is nice that they're notched, so you can utilize a tuning key or a screwdriver to help you get the initial installation, and then just fine tune it from there. So this is technically your tuners and bridge. Your tailpiece is up here. This is a lock nut system like you'd find on a Floyd Rose. So you put the ball end of the string up here, and then it gets clamped down, locked into place. But over here, you can see where the original tailpiece studs were filled in, as well as the original bridge. If you watch his video, he said he just utilized black nail polish to slightly hide those. I would say it does the job quite nicely in a pinch, because from a couple of feet back, you don't super obviously notice it. But there had to have been a sticker or something on this guitar at some point that just ate the finish away right there. I'll be curious to see if that glows the same way under black light, because there was a similar area on the back that looked more like a touch-up, but we'll see. As far as the controls, volume, tone, one for each pickup set. This knob is original, as is this one. These two over here are replacements. How can I tell? Look at the boldness of the numbers. They're vastly different. I'd say this thing looks pretty good even without a pick guard. But if you go back to the cleaning footage, that thing was just caked on with dust underneath it. So I'm betting sometime very early on in this guitar's life, somebody got an aftermarket Les Paul custom style pick guard. You can see it's got the multi-layers to it rather than the studio single ply. It looks good, but I think Headless pulls off the modern look better without it. We've got a pretty nice ding right there to see through to the maple top. But moving on from the maple top, mahogany body, likely 9-hole weight relief. We've got the mahogany neck with rosewood fretboard. Just to be a funny guy on this April 1st day, I thought I would give it the ultra deluxe fret polish job and condition the board, make it look good. When I first unboxed it, there was some light buzzing in the center portions of the neck, so maybe a level recrown would make this thing play better. Or maybe the truss rod just needs adjusted. I'll have to figure that out as I go. But these are looking good now. As far as obvious fret wear goes, it's mainly just in your cowboy chord area. But these frets, I just recorded some early 80s guitars. These are just such a nice breath of fresh air. They're so tall in comparison. You can do some great bends on them. But even though this is an unbound guitar, I like it because it almost looks like natural rosewood binding because they expose it rather than to cover it over in the black paint. But our first fret neck depth measure is 0.84 and it increases to 0.99 by the 12th, whereas the nut width is 1.69, increasing to 2.038 by the 12th. It's got a nice C-shaped neck profile to it. It's got that 24 3/4 inch scale with a 12-inch fretboard radius. So outside of our lock nut system, what exactly went on here? As we saw in the video, he basically just cut it straight across, which we can definitely see evidence of that right here. But that's nice because it's super clean. And I bring that up because if you wanted to, it'd be pretty easy to reattach this headstock, even if only for cosmetics or to make the guitar feel normal with a headstock, even though you don't have to use it. Because it's pretty clean over here. So if you wanted to, my idea was you've got just enough room right here and there to put a dowel inside of the neck. So you would route it deep in both locations, and then you could just slide it on into place, and you could use it as a gag at a gig and just like, oh no, I broke my Les Paul. And then continue to play it and just make the audience be like, what? Now, as far as restoring it to use the tuners, I don't think I'd suggest it. Just have fun with it as is. I decided to go ahead and restring it because, disaster struck. The lock nut was of very cheap quality. The low E and A screw just wouldn't secure again, and then eventually just gave out. So unfortunately I had to replace that. But the only lock nut that I had in my parts drawer sat way too high and the action just wasn't any good. And it was chrome, so I threw it onto the back. It looks like Kaylen might have had a similar idea because there were already 2 screw holes on the back, and I'm betting he did this and then put it to the top for better tuning stability. Because let's face it, having all this in wood that's eventually going to compress is not ideal, but I think this looks way more hilarious. Especially if you found a new way to attach the headstock now, just for laughs. You might think, hey, doesn't that get in your way while playing? No, it's like right where you don't need to be. You might occasionally brush up against it, but I think it's going to be just fine. But after I polish and clean the neck, you can see it looks like somebody took some steel wool to this at some point to really dull down some of the glossiness to the neck, but they didn't really do that good of a job, so it just ended up being slightly scratched rather than super dull. But here's that neck profile on the contour gauge. Just a nice rounded C shape. Now moving on to the back side of the body. Here's that area I was talking about that's kind of strange. Like maybe it's a sticker residue, maybe it's something else, I don't know. But we do have plenty of worming back here and marks and dings. But again, it cleaned up pretty nicely. But now our wiring. It's pretty easy to tell that the bridge stuff, no. The neck actually looks pretty good. However, if you look at these pots, they're not actually Gibson branded. So this looks like it was completely rewired at some point. We've got some sort of a other output jack in it. We've got Schaller strap locks in our usual locations, but the toggle switch looks decent. But that's pretty much the extent of what we can document of what's left of this once Gibson Les Paul into a headless monster. Okay, so as I was expecting, there's some weird stuff going on here. That black light's more like a touch-up / overspray. So it might have been that there was a ding right here and they just did a spot touch-up and honestly it didn't turn out that good. But there's something along similar lines going on over here too. Looking at the headstock actually shows us a lot. So that looks like it could be the original finish there, and then this is the new one. So they might have just like resprayed a new clear coat and added a little black when they were doing the repair just to make it look better. That honestly makes a lot of sense. Because even the back, you know they had to have done something to make this look this good and sand away the serial number. It's kind of cool to see just how thick the Gibson finish is in this era, as well as how thick the headstock veneer is. But this thing actually looks really cool as a ghastly green color. Now moving on to the backside, looks like maybe a little bit of stand rash and then, yeah, some sort of a touch-up on the edge. This was quite a project for someone. Looks like a filled-in area right there too. But the neck was relatively left alone. Well, outside of the obvious. And just for fun, let's look alongside the edges. And the base side like so. But all said and done, this 95 Studio without a headstock weighs 8 pounds, 14.3 ounces. How much does it weigh with a headstock and tuners? Let's see. About 9.5. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. But first, Kaylen, before he chopped the headstock off. And now after. And now let's see what I can do. And now for some regular tone samples. Okay, so how does it sound? That neck pickup is ridiculous. Like, to be fair, it's really close to the strings, but it's just so round. It was so overpowering I had to raise the bridge. And they play together as so. And if you're curious how to use a clip-on tuner, I just put it right here on my strap. I found that you can use the pick in between here to help you tune it. The low E actually takes quite a nice beating. It stays in tune pretty decently. A always needs a little help. D always needs some help. And it's not fair to judge the high E string because I have a really crappy cheap string on that. Ultimately, I think if you could have like a little metal guide or something right here, if you like the look of this like I do, because it's just so ridiculous, or reinstall a new locking nut up here and I think you might have more luck. But I think it sounds great. I hate to say this, but I do like a headless Les Paul. Now overall, would I suggest taking this on tour and playing live gigs with it? Yeah, not in this current setup. You might need to do a little bit more with that lock nut system if you need rock steady tuning stability, but You can definitely play this at home and have a fantastic little time with it. I know I did. And looking at this in the camera without the headstock is just quite trippy. But I was telling you earlier about the headless guitar phenomenon. This one's strange because once you get to about the 14th fret, I naturally in my head say, okay, time to slow down because Les Pauls, they're not necessarily known for the best upper fret access. I really think Gibson could get away with doing a headless Les Paul, even if it's just as a limited edition run to make people talk. What I would suggest is thinning out the body just a little bit more, similar to an Access Les Paul, and of course giving yourself the comfort cut. That way, you're a little bit more comfortable up here. They could do some as stop bars and some with Floyds. But if you're interested in being the next owner of this April Fools piece, you can find it for sale on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. But all right, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed this year's fun. Take care.